Our next speaker for today, we have Tom Henricksen, Principal Java Developer, NJM Insurance Group. Tom is a problem-solving technology professional. He has worked in various roles in technology for over 20 plus years. He has learned how to solve challenging issues in technology and lead technical teams. He can help you develop those skills too. This topic for today are humans are hard, code is easy.
Hi, I'm Tom Henricksen. This is Humans Are Hard, Code is Easy. Here's a string of thoughts that ran across my mind early in my programming career. Why can't people just leave me alone and I can do my work? I can figure this out myself. I don't need others' help or any input to turn this thing around. Why don't people understand me? I think it must be they're just dumb. They don't recognize genius when they see it. Perhaps you've been there too, a frustrated developer who feels like they know enough. However, the success you thought you'd have is out of reach. You see others who make better strides, but why? Is it a skills gap? I want to share with you how I learned about my skills gap. Java, check. Linux, check. SQL, check. Humans? Humans are hard. Code is easy. So I focused on the technology. One of my first mentors was a database administrator named Doyle. He really knew his stuff, but didn't say much. That can make learning challenging. One thing Doyle would do is fix the problem for me. He would fix it so quickly and then leave. What did you do? He was already gone. Working with Doyle gave me some insight. Technical people hate explaining basic stuff. Ask them a simple question and they will flip the bozo bit on you. What is the bozo bit, you say? A few years after working with Doyle, I got to work with a software architect named Corey. He had many interesting observations. One thing Corey would do if you asked him a stupid question, one that you could have easily answered by doing some research on your own, he wouldn't answer your question or work with you. That is the bozo bit. Bozo, of course, referring to Bozo the Clown, bit in reference to computer bit or binary storage. Corey was pretty extreme, but many developers can be that way. To gain respect from those developers, we need to know the technology. Humans are hard, code is easy. So I focused on coding. I learned new technologies. I tried to keep my head down and avoid getting the bozo bit flipped on me. A few years later, I transitioned into a new job, technical lead. One year during my annual evaluation, my leader shared with me, Tom, we think you have solid credentials. Coding skills got you the job, but we need you to develop other skills. My leader shared with me where I was failing. Delegation. He shared how I wasn't delegating work to my teammates. Case in point, there was an upgrade that needed to be done. I did the work in 10 minutes or so. To explain that to some of my teammates would have taken twice that amount of time or more. Another trap I fell into with delegation is a belief in our value. We can convince ourselves that we are worth more when others can't do the same work as us. I remember working with Jamie the first time. I wasn't quite sure he understood what we were doing. He was always done quickly. Then I finally asked him. Here he had created a script to deploy changes and update dependencies. Oh, I was doing this all manually. I was worried about delegation, and the people I worked with had better ideas. Perhaps I didn't know everything I thought I did. A few years later, I got to work with a leader named John. We knew each other through a mutual friend. I had begun to coach individuals and teams. John wanted an outside resource to help him change his team's mindset. He shared how most IT people work with others in a transactional fashion. We get the requirements and we solve the issue. John said, Tom, my team is like bank tellers. They get asked to fix something and they do, just like a teller gets a check and deposits the check. I want my team to be more like a financial planner. A financial planner builds a relationship, then they can anticipate needs. So you're saying, John, you want your team to have better relationships with their customers? John said, Tom, if they build better relationships, they will develop empathy and understanding. Relationships, understanding, and empathy? That won't work. That's what I thought at the time, but I was wrong. John knew his team wasn't as understanding and as empathetic as he'd hoped they'd be. He began requiring them to talk to the community directors when they traveled. These conversations helped them foster relationships. Instead of just fixing the problem, they fostered relationships too. Each little change John made helped his team understand the community directors had many things on their plate. These conversations worked the other way too. The community directors began to give John's team space. If something went wrong, they trusted them to resolve it. John proved me wrong. He overcame his deficit by being curious and empathetic. He was able to change the way his team interacted with the organization. He became very influential in the organization, so much so that he has since been given additional responsibilities. From bank tellers to financial planners, he remade the image of his IT team. This brings me to my main idea. Coding skills got you the job. Influence will get you the career. Coding skills got you the job. Influence will get you the career. What do I mean? Developers are focusing on technology skills only. If you truly want to set yourself apart, you need to know how to influence and collaborate with teams. Gone are the days when we could just send in requirements with pizza and out pops code. Organizations are looking for more from their developers. My problem, was I was terrible at relationships. I had confirmation. I had proof. Although I didn't start out as a developer, my first step in my professional career was quite different. I remember it like it was yesterday. My first job out of college, I started at Wallace. What is Wallace? We sold business forms and office supplies in Des Moines, Iowa, kind of like Dunder Mifflin. Armed with a business management degree and no real idea, I had 3 job options when I graduated from college. I could sell insurance, or I could sell life insurance, or I could sell business forms. So I did what any sane person would do. I sold business forms. Who wants to call on our friends' parents for insurance anyways? Did I mention that Des Moines, Iowa is the insurance capital of the world? Back to my first day at Wallace. Can you believe I had to make a few cold calls before lunch? Let me remind you, in college, the only time I called my friends was when we were having a kegger. Getting people to buy business forms is a bit more difficult than getting college students to drink beer. Now, I really didn't want to make those calls, but lunch was getting close. I was given 3 prospects from another sales representative to call on. Hello, this is Tom Henricksen. Is Mike Huff available? Oh, can you tell him that Tom Henricksen called? Yeah, I'm from Wallace. Click. Whew. Hello, this is Tom Henricksen, your new Wallace representative. Oh, sorry, Mr. Hegna. I apologize if our labels off your product. Click. Wow. I guess we got disconnected there. What? Do we call on gentlemen's clubs? My coworkers all die laughing. Turns out this is their way of initiating new sales representatives. Soon after my first day in sales, I started to realize this wasn't going anywhere. My sales career went down in flames pretty quickly. A friend of mine shared with me the opportunity in technology, so I began to pursue a different degree and head in a new direction. I left my job in sales and began work as a developer. Now, working as a developer is quite a bit different than working in sales. The sales office I worked in was always full of people. They would be talking on the phones to customers or talking to each other. The developers I worked with, well, they were a quiet bunch on the whole. Friday afternoon with the sales reps, the newest rep had to go get beer for everyone. Friday afternoon for the developers was quiet, just like the rest of the week. Now, perhaps You're thinking, it's starting to sound like I didn't want to make this change, but that was not the case. I slowly began to realize I was more Spock than Jimmy Fallon. The quiet contemplative work of a developer suited me more. As I began work in technology, I started to work in lots of old technologies. I wanted to move into something more current at that time. I began to hear a lot of buzz around the Java language. In my free time and nights and weekends, I read and worked through tutorials online. All this work paid off a few months later when a company leader came to me and said, "Tom, would you be able to help Dave with a new application?" Turned out they needed someone who could write an application using Java. I, of course, agreed. Like Luke beginning to use the Force, I was starting with some basics. As my Java skills began to improve from experience, I learned a few other things too. I began to work with someone who seemed quite sharp from a technical perspective. But Eric was kind of hard to get along with. He would yell at people he worked with. You might say he was a complete jerk sometimes. The managers and team allowed this to happen in a large part because he was so productive. Now I can still see it now when I close my eyes. Eric was a smoker, and he was trying to quit, which made him even more testy. Eric and Sri were working together on some files when I came walking down a row of cubes. I could see Eric in Sri's cube yelling. You know how people get mad and their veins look like they're going to pop out of their head? Eric's veins were about ready to explode. Then he ran out the door. I guess he needed a smoke. I asked Sri if he was okay. He said he was okay, but that no one should have to put up with him. Sri couldn't have been more correct. Eric was a tyrant who ran around like Darth Vader, intimidating people. We all put up with his terrible treatment just because he was able to code a lot. Even though developers act like Spock, we have feelings too. I would like to tell you that Eric was let go and the team was able to move on. The company did nothing to it. His behavior was left unnoticed. If you work with someone like Eric, or perhaps a nicer version, they might take all the tough work and make it easier for others. Learning how to be a team player doesn't come naturally to some. Eric wasn't a team player. He was out for himself. If you work with someone like Eric, a coding hero, and they take vacation, things can fall apart. Let me share an example of a leader I worked with. He dealt with a similar issue with a coding hero. Ben was a leader I worked with, and he had a coding hero called Dave. At least we'll say that for this conversation. Dave would code things that were more complex than others could understand. Dave decided to take a long trip. He was coming up on a milestone birthday. To celebrate, he was going to take 3 weeks off and bicycle across multiple states with all his gear. Now, Ben realized this was going to be an issue. He discussed this challenge with the team. The team decided to have knowledge transfer sessions with Dave. Ben helped foster this collaboration. This allowed the team to slowly chip away at the knowledge gap. It also made the team more resilient. My next stop, I began to master my skills in Java. I was responsible for an application that required me to learn some new technologies. Software development can be a bit like trending song sales on iTunes. One day something's hot, the next day it's out of date. During this time in my career, many open source tools became popular. Mastery for Luke Skywalker came after a battle with Darth Vader. Programmers, they have small battles each day. As Stephen Pressfield says, the amateur tweets, the pro works. Professional programmers show up every day and slay small demons. The first skill I had to master as a developer was debugging. Of course, today the tools are much more mature. The first application I had to debug didn't have any such tools. I was armed with a print statement in a log file. Quite primitive by today's standards. All right, here, let's see. Where is that value being set? All right, let's add a print statement there. Recompile. Oh, I forgot the semicolon again. All right, let me add the semicolon, recompile, run the report. Oh, the database. I forgot to update the database. All right, let me update that table, run the report. Now that looks better. Of course, Debugging is so much easier today, but we still need to use the old bean. As Steve McConnell points out in his book, Code Complete, we need to learn the types of mistakes we make. Early in my Java career, I made the same mistake time and again. I would forget to initialize my variables. I could still hear my coworker Ken laughing at me when he would look at my code. Developers like to impress each other. I had to use the singleton pattern to fix that. There are many esoteric topics we can talk about for hours. In Essentialism, the Disciplined Pursuit of Less, Greg McKeown shares how important editing is to journalism. Where journalists bring the stories and write up the ideas, the editor does the important job. They review the piece and rework it. Over my years, I've mentored many developers. One in particular sticks out. He began reading about code basics. This made him add unnecessary code. One time we were debugging an error he was getting together when I asked him, "Why is this loop here?" He looked at me unsure and said, I don't know. I thought it would help. He thought it would help. Once we removed the unnecessary loop, we resolved his error. Adding code is easy. Knowing what to keep is hard. Now, it's not that I'm saying computer science basics are not important. We need to master these too. However, if we put the sole focus on them, though, our careers will falter. I spoke before about Eric. He had mastered computer science basics, although his teammates couldn't stand him, though. We need to be good at our work and get along with our team. If we do just one of these, we aren't doing our job. As I learned more about soft skills, my career progressed, first as a developer, then into a senior developer role. Next, I became a technical lead. Finally, I'd moved into manager of software development. I was starting to feel pretty good about my career progression. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a Friday morning in May. I took my kids to school and came into the office at my normal time, a little before 8 a.m. Oddly enough, my boss was in. He usually came in at 9 or after. Anyways, I sat down and unpacked my things. Then Scott, my boss, came to my desk and said, "Tom, can I talk with you?" I said, sure, and I followed him to his office. Although when we came to his office, he took a right instead. That is strange, as I followed him down the hallway. Then he took a left into Sandy's office. Who is Sandy, you ask? Well, she was the director of human resources. We sat down. Then Scott looked at me and said, "Tom, this is your last day here." If you've ever had that said to you at work or in a relationship, you know what it feels like. The rest was strange as I felt the calm come over me. I knew something was going to happen. Although as I looked across the table, I could tell Scott and Sandy felt terrible. They discussed the next steps. I packed my things and left. Getting fired gives us a good chance to reflect. What did we do wrong? How could we have avoided this? As I looked back, I realized one lesson first. What led to this was a lack of clarity. I did not clearly understand an objective. I needed to ask better questions. As a result, the team I led didn't execute accordingly. Processing this, though, took time as we can get frustrated and want to blame others. The second lesson I learned was the importance of relationship management. As John taught us earlier, we need to continually foster our connections. I began to reach out to my network, and the opportunities were plentiful. So even in something as challenging and trying as getting fired can be a moment for learning. We just need to take the time to unpack it. Mastering basic skills requires guidance. Early in my career, I worked with Wei. He instilled in me a systemic approach that I still use today. Software development is essentially problem solving. Wei began to notice that oftentimes I was trying to solve 5 things at once. Wei's guidance was brought clear to me a few years later when I attended Michael Hyatt's Best Year Ever conference. He discussed goal setting. Michael said, "Detailed plans are great if you're building a nuclear submarine." He continued, "For everything else, just focus on the next step." Wei and Michael agreed on this point. Don't overthink it. In Proverbs, it is said, "In the multitude of counselors, there is safety, Luke's journey first brought him to Obi-Wan Kenobi, where he learned some basics, similar to what I learned from Wei. He kept learning, and so have I. Reflection doesn't come easy for me. I want to move on to the next thing. In David Marquis' book, Leadership is Language, he details the red work, the doing, and blue work, the thinking. In the book, he uses the Industrial Revolution as an example, where the workers did the red work and the managers did the blue work. Today, knowledge workers must do both. We need to take time to step back and reflect on how we are doing. How can I improve? Think, apply, reflect. By now, you're starting to think, Tom, I'm a developer. I don't need no stinking soft skills. Of course, if you don't want your career to get better, keep on keeping on. My career path has changed dramatically as I've learned the importance of communication, relationships, and influence. Let's explore 3 core soft skills. These will set the stage for a career transformation. So remember, coding skills got you the job. Influence will get you the career. Number 1, communication. Listen to what is being said. Ask good questions and seek clarity. Developers who do this write better code. They don't assume they know the answer. In the book, The Pragmatic Programmer, Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas talk about the importance of digging for requirements. We need to look between the lines. Part of communication is knowing your message. Too many times in my career, I've just started talking. Know what you want to say? And say it. Number 2, influence. In How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, he describes how we need to talk in terms of the other person's interests. I once tried to convince a corporate vice president we needed to use a new technology. He wasn't interested at all. However, the next time I spoke to him, I aligned a technical change with a corporate objective. The outcome of that conversation was quite different. Number 3 of the 3 core soft skills is leading change. When we want to lead a change, we need to share the vision. A few years ago, I was fortunate to work with a sharp product owner named Nakia. We began working together on an application for customer service representatives. As we began, she realized the team was struggling with understanding the vision. That's when Nakia realized we needed a field trip. Nakia had the entire team spend a day with those customer service representatives. We got to see their struggles. The team came back energized and with a better understanding. Nakia was able to lead a change by connecting and sharing the vision with the team. These 3 core soft skills can change your career direction. Let me share a story how I use them myself. In my first role as a manager, I tried to get to know the team. This can help build trust and influence with them. Perhaps you're starting to think, these won't work for me. Let me tell you about AJ. His path was a rocky one. AJ was a strong developer, but he rarely talked. He worked in a slow, methodical fashion and always kept his emotions in check. Over time, his teammates became irritated with his style. I tried to get to know him. For instance, we connected on a few things. AJ traveled to Germany to pick up his new BMW. He was quite excited about that. Still, his unwillingness to communicate with others, and especially the product owner, was wearing thin. That's when my manager came to me and said, Tom, it is time for AJ to decide if he wants to be part of the team. My manager asked me to put AJ on a PIP or performance improvement plan. I had 60 days to help him improve or else. Despite AJ's strong coding skills, his career was on a downward trajectory. When I met with AJ and explained the situation, he began yelling at me and stormed out of the meeting. The first 2 weeks after this incident were really shaky. He wouldn't talk to me or anyone. I kept checking in with him daily. I knew he was an introvert and he needed his space and time. Eventually, AJ and I sat down and discussed the PIP and how it made him feel. That's when I got AJ to agree to try some experiments. We met as a team and crafted some working agreements. These clarified everyone's role. Also, it stated how we would work together. I was able to get the product owner to give him one final shot. In the end, we were able to give AJ the space he needed. He was able to develop the soft skills he needed to change his career direction. Through coaching him and his teammates, we worked through it. AJ was able to stay and really come into himself. I was able to coach AJ and the team, influencing and communicating with them using the 3 core soft skills. I learned how to help AJ, myself, and others. You can do this too. Coding is important, but it's not enough. We can keep our head down and bozo it through our career, but that won't get us where we want to go. Relationships matter. Empathy and understanding matter. Communication matters. These soft skills will lead to more influence, which gives you more success. Better collaboration with your coworkers, people seeking out your opinion as an expert, managers choosing you for the most exciting projects. Practicing soft skills is how you code the future of your dreams.